I wanted to do a quick episode about the view from Russia because we've been looking at Russian language press coverage and wanted to go through a few findings from a recent opinion poll in Russia about the views on the military activities in Ukraine and also to do a little bit of coverage on the sort of manufactured consent that we're seeing in the UK at the moment, which is very reminiscent of the COVID situation where only one point of view is allowed and anyone that's dissenting from that point of view needs to be vilified and silenced. I think those are kind of troubling developments. So let's start with the opinion poll results. This is a short summary, and the agency that does this is the website. It doesn't seem to be working all the time. You have to look at it through a VPN. But these are results of 5th of March. So this was the question asking Russian people what they think the military operation is about. And the sort of largest share was 46% defending Russia against NATO expansion. But slightly surprisingly, I guess there's other reasons given. Almost in equal measure would be a change in Ukrainian politics, and 18% is the protection of ethnic Russians in the breakaway republics. It's a little bit surprising for us because this is the reason given really for the military operation is this protection, but this is sort of second, equal or third on the list of reasons to go in. So the number one reason is defense against NATO expansion. And interestingly, the idea of absorbing Ukraine into Russia has a very low sort of support amongst the population. They don't think that's a valid reason or the reason for doing this military operation. So I think people have speculated that this is President Putin's real plan is a greater Russia, rebuilding the Russian Empire. But according to this, a lot of people do not see that as a sort of reason for having a military intervention. That will raise questions about, if that is the idea, how much support will there be for that? I think the answer is not very much. Whereas this reason seems to be reasonably widely accepted, and certainly talking to people over there, they seem to recognize this as a major justification and rationale for the military operation. In terms of, rather than explaining the reason for the operation, but just in terms of support levels, the numbers from 5th of March are 71% support, 21% do not support, 8% not sure, and this has gone up a couple of percent since 2 weeks ago, where it was at 68%. So, to some extent, this is maybe slightly surprising, but I think the 21% figures. But what it does, I think, suggest is that the street protests that you do see on the Russian news are not particularly reflective of the wide body of the population that supports this military operation. So I think as people look for ways to undermine the regime, of course there'll be undermining at the oligarch level, and Mr. Hodorkovsky, the convicted criminal, has called for essentially a change of regime, and he's mentioned by name a number of individuals inside Russia, asking them to declare themselves. So there's an effort to have a change of regime through the elite. The next level would be the general staff and the military. What do they think? And then I think, to be fair, nobody really knows for sure what their view is of the current military operation. But in terms of getting widespread popular support to have a change in direction or change in regime, that doesn't seem that likely from this opinion poll, particularly if this has gone up recently. Now, all these numbers will change as things develop, but right now that doesn't seem to be a very realistic prospect. So there seems to be a fair amount of support for the military operation, even though the reasons given for the operation are different for different groups of people. And I just want to do a bit of a news update. The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has released these pictures of what it claims were invasion plans for the breakaway republics, which again was ostensibly the reason for the military operation. And now they've publicized these documents. Impossible to say, whether they're genuine, not genuine, but at least they've provided these photos and some documentary evidence that they say is evidence of an invasion plan for the eastern regions, and this was already in place, I think, from January or so. So, this is ostensibly what triggered the military operations. So here now they're providing some evidence of that. I wanted to move on to the second topic, which is the manufactured consent that you see in the UK at the moment. And as I said, it seems to have a lot of similarity with the COVID situation, where there has to be sort of manufactured consent and uniformity of opinion, and vilification of anyone that doesn't agree or raises any other points. So someone tweeted this out. This was press coverage about Ukraine before this all started. The recognition that it's a pretty, unfortunately, corrupt country. The president was tangled up in oppression of media outlets and non-disclosure of offshore companies, and that was covered in some of the press outlets. So quite a bit of negative, actually, coverage of what's going on in the government of Ukraine. And then all of a sudden that goes from this picture to this picture, a standing ovation, 650 people in parliament, all kinds of comparisons to President Zelensky and Churchill, and limitless bravery, inspiration, etc., etc. In the space of 4 weeks. I mean, it's still the same individual with the same questions about corruption in the country and offshore interests and all the other things that were on the previous slide. All of that's been swept away, and now we have this absolutely unanimous opinion of his Churchillian standing. Now, I don't believe this is realistic, that you can go from one to the other, and this very much feels like manufactured consent. It's still the same individuals with same drawbacks. Just a few weeks of this endless one-sided PR campaign has resulted in this picture of 650 people in a standing ovation. And I wanted also to say with that if you question that narrative and say, well, there needs to be some nuance in this situation. This is not black and white, like we've said before. This is not sort of cowboys versus Indians, and no room for any nuance. If you make comments like that, you get quite viciously attacked through Twitter, and lots of bad language, swear words, and various kind of threats. And again, that's exactly the same as COVID. If you question anything in the official narrative, you basically want to kill granny. And it's same here now. If you question, well, should we provide unequivocal support endlessly to Ukraine without addressing any concerns of Russia, that makes you an apologist, a Putin fan, a Nazi, whatever else. So it's the same complete lack of tolerance for any alternative views. And I wanted to focus in on one of the MPs who is involved, I would say, in some of the most distasteful manufacturing of that consent and spreading Russian hatred. And here he is this is MP Fabricant, who is endlessly on the media, endlessly tweeting, endlessly involved in self-promotion. Here he is on the 8th of March tweeting out a photo of Major General Gerasimov, who was apparently killed the same day. And that's, for me, already pretty unethical to be tweeting out photos of field commanders who just died the previous day. And he was obviously teeing this up to get the response which he did get, which is here on the right. I mean, I'm not going to read this out. May he rot in hell, good. So you have a very senior Russian commander killed in the field, and then this MP, who is engaged in this activity all the time, is setting up this response, which I find pretty bad. And this is, of course, fueling more hatred, making any kind of solution or negotiations more difficult. And this is something he's doing all the time on every single media outlet he can get to. The organization he's tweeting from is the Ukrainian military intelligence. They also tweeted this picture out on, I think, the day before or the next day. This is them tweeting out a picture of Russian prisoners of war, allegedly Russian prisoners of war, and taunting Russian wives, saying, "Wives of Russia, are your husbands celebrating the 8th of March?" So this is pretty bad. I mean, and actually this is the symbol of the organization that's tweeting out those pictures, the pictures of the dead Major General and the pictures of the prisoners of war. This is the Ukrainian military intelligence outfit. And you can see from this, it's not exactly subtle. It's a sword pointing into Russia. So, the aggressive intentions are pretty clear here. So I think this goes back to the point where this is not a black and white situation where there's a lot of bad blood on both sides, and frankly quite bad behavior on both sides over the years. I mean, depending how far you go back in history. But I find it pretty tasteless that a member of parliament would be actually supporting and encouraging this organization to be tweeting out pictures of deceased major generals and also taunting wives back in Russia with those pictures of prisoners of war. And then just sort of wrapping up, essentially, again, the reason for the conflict that's been stated, at least on the Russian side, and it's a point of view that's been acknowledged since 1996 by every major foreign policy expert involved in Russia, is that expanding NATO into Ukraine is not a good idea. And it's obviously not a good idea because Ukraine is a country with an ethnic split between East and West. And let's put it politely, it's been an unstable country, multiple sort of revolutions, disputed elections, corruption, etc., etc. So pushing that kind of organization into NATO is understood that was always going to be a problem, and we went through that in the other videos, that there's been a lot of warnings for a lot of years saying this is really a bad idea. So ostensibly this is the reason for the conflict at the moment. And going back again to that opinion survey, that's the way most Russians will see this, or at least 46% of the respondents will see this military operation as protection against NATO expansion. Now, what's happened is the West has changed that position, and they have reinvented this as a war of expansion against an erratic Putin. And therefore they've changed this to, rather than deal with the issue of NATO expansion, what they now want is regime change in Russia. And that's being repeated more and more often now. And I personally, and I've put in the other videos, believe that was always the intention of the West, and that is actually why that NATO process is going eastwards endlessly in this way. This has been to create this kind of tension, create exactly this kind of situation, which will therefore increase the chances of regime change. And what's happening again, and again, this is similar to COVID, we have these so-called leaders announcing that they're happy to pay the price. It's going to be worth it for Liz Truss, okay, to thwart Vladimir Putin. Again, this is part of the regime change agenda. But of course, there's people dying all the time in Ukraine, and almost no coverage of, let's get a ceasefire in place as soon as possible. Everything by the Western leadership now is about regime change and punishing Russia. Almost no attention given to how about a solution, how about a ceasefire, or anything else. And this price that people are going to pay is mind-boggling. If you're on whatever UK MPs or ministers £100,000 are on, okay, it's a doable price. But if you're in any kind of North African country relying on wheat imports, or if you're kind of on minimal wage or income support trying to heat yourself, this is going to be a breathtaking punishment. That the prices now of energy resources and food, particularly wheat and fertilizer, they are going to cause, unbelievable amounts of hardship for tremendous numbers of people. But for the sort of regime change crowd, I don't think any of that stuff figures into any of their calculations, or even the daily death toll in Ukraine. For them, this is a political objective, and they're happy to pay the price, or for you to pay the price, or me. But for them, doesn't seem to make any difference. I think this is very dangerous, and this is actually going to make things much, much worse than they already are, and they already are beginning to spiral out of control as we put more military material in there, and you now have soldiers or ex-soldiers in military uniform openly now going into Ukraine and being interviewed on TV. I think the UK is kind of close to being becoming a participant in the war itself, basically. So this is not going to go well, I don't think, at this rate. And then just wrapping up, basically, I think the big picture for us, and again why we're happy to not be supportive of the UK, is again, this is a lot of similarities with COVID, the tyrannical state. So what we're seeing now is the rule of law, and we saw that in Canada, where bank accounts are just frozen because they don't particularly like what the people, the protesters, are trying to do. We've got now the same thing here. These lists of people being sanctioned and then having assets taken away from them. And again, it's this famous MP Fabrikant saying, essentially linking the bomb in Mariupol with taking the football club from Roman Abramovich. I don't see the link there. Nobody cares anymore. It's like, we're doing this, we don't like those guys, so let's just sort of go in and take assets away. So this is also part of the same picture, that the government seems to feel it can do whatever it likes to whoever it likes, whenever it likes. And you can all cheer now that Abramovich has lost his football club, and not a guy I particularly like for various reasons, but this will come back on us at some point. So the rule of law is breaking down. I think that same issue now with the central bank freezing of reserves. Again, people in other countries will understand it's no longer safe to have assets in, for example, the UK. Who knows when there's something else that they don't like, they're just going to use this as a lever. So the legal process of having paperwork, going to a judge, getting a decision, that's gone. Now bureaucrats just make these decisions unilaterally. Another big aspect has been the merger of state and business, where, again, in COVID, business was used to get around constitutional protections. So the vaccine mandate, they tried to force that through businesses in order to avoid constitutional protections for individuals against the government. And that same mechanism now is clear in this conflict, with business 100% following foreign policy and all pulling out of Russia simultaneously. I don't know how many, let's say 70 businesses more or less in the same week. That again, it kind of looks good at the moment, but the merger of state and business has never really been a good idea in the past, and this certainly doesn't look like a good idea at the moment. and tolerance. One of the things that we did this for is because I think we're seeing again the exact same applied psychology, the unethical use of applied psychology that we saw in COVID, being applied in this situation. I mean, it's brainwashing now. It's clearly 24/7, one message, all media, no dissent allowed, and very, very biased presentation of everything, basically. Starting right from the heroes of Snake Island, a completely fake story pushed out by every single media channel. It's impossible to know what the facts are on the ground for days at a time, but the media will just take whatever narrative they're given and immediately run with that. No checking, no second opinion, no alternative point of view. So we're seeing a very biased media message, and I'm pretty sure behind this we'll see applied psychology at work, an attack of any outgroups. So anybody that supports in any way the Russian position is a traitor and a Nazi or whatever else. And we've seen now pretty disturbing footage actually of the Russian embassy being attacked in Ireland and people celebrating that through Twitter. That's very, very dangerous, and this is just going to get worse and worse because there is no debate, no discussion. There's just vilification of the other side and this sort of rabble rousing to attack anything to do with Russia, and of course all the ludicrous firing of conductors and not playing music from composers is going completely irrational and crazy. And then the last thing with tyrannical side of government is individual liberty. Well, that was really an issue of lockdown. There is no limit to government power now. They just decide what to do and when. And I think all of those things play into each other. So the government in the West now is getting very, very tyrannical, and it's not. I think, especially with the applied psychology, it's deciding what it's going to do, and then it's essentially using applied psychology to make sure everyone goes along, and that gets you to the 650 people having a standing ovation for a leader who only a few weeks before that was considered deeply flawed, running a corrupt, divided country, and this is how it goes. I think that's all we wanted to say on this one. We haven't had time to put the links to the various articles, but we'll put that up in a PDF, which will be available through the website. So I hope you found this interesting. Thanks very much. Goodbye.